Good morning, long enthusiasts. Let's go ahead and get started with our coffee break today. My name is Andrew Tobin. I'm a sales engineer here at Long. We've got a pretty cool topic today. R-32 refrigerant is what we're going to talk about. Um, Obviously, this is a very, very deep dive subject that is probably suited for a lot more than 15 minutes, but we're going to tickle everybody. We're going to talk about R-32. If you remember last week and the week prior, both the large Rebel applied cap and the smaller Rebel units, all going to be offered in R-32 from Daikin. So we brought Peter on, Peter Cedar Green with Daikin, who's going to talk about R-32 and why it's a good refrigerant for us. So go ahead and take it away, Peter.
Thank you, Andrew, and everybody. I appreciate everybody joining this morning. As Andrew said, we've got there's a tremendous amount of information. Some of it's new, some of it's old. I'm going to jump right in. I've given a presentation on this many times. Oftentimes we talk about kind of why we are where we are, but that has definitely come and gone by now. And pretty much Andrew asked me to speak today regarding R-32, as Daikin has chosen to use R-32 as a replacement for 410A. So we're going to talk a lot about what Daikin believes is the reasons why we've chosen to go down that path as a low GWP alternative. It's important to note that R410A, while R410A is not going away, we're obviously phasing down these refrigerants. We are well in this. As Andrew mentioned, we've got product that's already starting to come out using R32. When a manufacturer chooses to go and make a change like this, obviously there's a lot of time and effort and that goes into making a decision like this, because if we're going to do this, we're putting a lot of eggs in the basket. And so when we made the decision to replace 410A with 32, we did it very systematically, very data driven. And so I'm going to kind of go through this and address kind of the reasons why. And one of the reasons, obviously, that it's a very proven refrigerant. There's 230 million units installed around the world. It's a very easy refrigerant to use. It's a single component. It's extremely efficient, and I'm gonna show you that in a few slides now. And then it's also very readily available, and you can get your hands on it today. So as I mentioned, it's a very proven refrigerant. You can see back in Japan, I think in 2011, 2012, we started using R32. Developing countries have been using it for the last 10 years. In fact, quite honestly, North America seems to be the one that kind of was one of the last to kind of embrace it. But we've been starting to use it in North America. In fact, you can go down to some of your Home Depots and Lowe's and find R32 in small charges, like in small refrigerant. So it's been being used whether we knew it or not. So R32 is it's an easy refrigerant. As I mentioned, it's a single component. You can reuse this very easily. It's easy to use on site without, we can charge equipment without changing composition. It's easy to reclaim, reuse, and that's going to be big moving forward as refrigerants are phased down. We will be actually looking to reuse refrigerants in the field, and so R32 will be very good to use. Blends such as 454 do not share these benefits. It's important to note too that with 454B, it's made up relatively of almost 70% of R32 as a blend. As I mentioned, R32 can be charged both in a liquid and a gas. 454B cannot. So all of these things obviously help us when we're on site, as for a technician, and allow for faster and easier service and maintenance. I realize this is a kind of an eyesore, but it's a very important chart. And if you'll notice here at the 1-to-1, this is where 410A is from a efficiency and a capacity. So that's our baseline. So one of the reasons when we look to see what refrigerants, and really the two main refrigerants are 454B and R-32 right now to replace 410A. Both of those refrigerants fall under the 700 GWP. But when we look to see from an efficiency and a capacity standpoint, which refrigerant was better, which hit both of those, R-32 was definitely, it was the one that both had better efficiency and better capacity. So then 454B, which you can see is right down here. We also can see here too, so on the R-34, kind of have a new area here. So as both 410A and 454B, or 410A was an A1 refrigerant. So this was a no flame propagation and a lower toxicity. Now, as we move along, we've got a new category here, lower flammability, so an A2L. Both R-32 and 454B do fall into the A2 category. And so that's important as we move forward to note from a flammability and toxicity, both refrigerants fall in as an A2L. As I mentioned earlier, too, from a standpoint of efficiency and capacity, Daikin, we ran a test using a rubble applied inverter compressor. We used our 410A compressor. Here's our baseline. We ran a test with an R-32 refrigerant, and we gained about 10% better efficiency, whereas 454B, we lost about 5% efficiency on the refrigerant in the same piece of equipment. You hear us talk a lot about GWP, and the EPA has used, as we've moved forward, 700 GWP moving forward. CARB used 750. But while those are all very important measures, really, when we look at the whole, it's not just the GWP, but we want to look at the indirect effects and the direct effects of the refrigerant to look at the life cycle climate performance. And as you note, one real major driving factor in any piece of equipment is going to be the power that's generated to run that piece of equipment over the lifetime of the piece of equipment. So while we could have a lower GWP, if the piece of equipment is not as efficient, we're really you're negating it. So those are two very important components when we consider when we consider moving a refrigerant. And I'm going to show you a little bit more information on that. As you can see from this graph, again, 410A, R-32, and R-54B, you can see the different colorizations. And as I mentioned earlier, with one of the largest driving factors in the life cycle performance is the power that's generated in order to run that piece of equipment. And that's shown here with the dark blue. As you can see here, here's 410A, and this is over about 18,000 run hours over of the piece of equipment. But you can see the major driving factor for the energy usage from a 410A and R-32 and R-54B. While 410A and R-32 are relatively close, R-32 still has the lowest consumption, or for energy consumption. And then you can see the other areas here which show leakage, usage over time, things like that. We often hear about R-32, and one of the reasons that people who have chosen to use something else, they talk about patents. Currently, R-32 has no patents. For many of you that are aware, Daikin actually is in the refrigerant manufacturing, and I think it's a great thing to show that Daikin actually, back in 2011, we released and offered free access to all 93 patents for emerging countries and expanded free access worldwide in 2015. And so this just shows you how much confidence that Daikin had in R-32 and what they felt, they believed that what it would do to the world, and to release this at no cost so others could then use it in their equipment. So it just shows, one, there are no patents on R-32, where there are a patent on 454B, and just in the trust and confidence that Daikin had with this refrigerant. Again, one of the things too about 450 R-32 is the cost. So if you go and look and try to buy a pound of R-32 versus a pound of 454B, you will find the cost. It's less expensive. Again, you're buying a single component versus a blend. It's easier from a time standpoint when it comes to maintaining and servicing in the field. For those of you who obviously labor is expensive, and so anything we can do to help streamline that is going to save you and your customers money. And again, it's very accessible. It's used globally, and has been for several decades. Here's another one, and this is one of my favorite charts, just because again it shows me data. And this data here, from a standpoint, again, if you see 410A, it is an A1 classification, but you can see the GWP of almost 2100. And as I mentioned earlier, the CARB standard, and that's California Air Resources, was 750. The EPA is 700. And so one of the things I want to show you here is that while as we talk about the GWP, we're at 675, and as you can see with 454B, we're at 466. And you're like, well, that just seems, it's a better refrigerant. It's a lower GWP. Well, keep in mind, one of the things, as I showed you in previous slides, is the efficiency of the refrigerant. We can use almost 40% less charge, and we gain almost 10% efficiency, sometimes 12%. So if you look at the effectiveness of the refrigerant, because we can use less charge and the efficiency we get, this really, from a GWP standpoint, if you're looking apples to apples, our GWP on this is about 475 compared to about 476. So it's very negligible. The other thing that's extremely important to point out here is the glide, the rate at which the components, the boiling point due to the blend of the components. There is no glide with R-32, and there it's a 1.5 with R-54B. And while again we use blends, and I'm not saying that R-54B is not a good refrigerant, I'm just pointing out the differences and why Daikin has chosen to go with R-32. Another thing too that we often hear is pressure differences. You guys, the pressure differences, I think on the PSIG on R410 is in the 430s, 440, something like that, 420s. R54B, 454B is like 410 something, and R-32 is like 440. So you guys, they're all relatively, they are so close. It's a real non-entity as far as pressure differences. And again, from a flammability standpoint as well, they're all A2L refrigerants. So we believe, as I said, the reason why Daikin chose to go down this path is just proven. It's easy, it's efficient, it's available. We've got great lifetime costs with emissions, and we just feel this was the right choice for us to go. So that is a lot of information in 12 or 13 minutes, but I think I hope that these slides show you the reason why we chose to go that path, why it's the right choice for us at this time, and while it is probably the better refrigerant for our products and for you and your customers. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Peter. Like you said, that's 10 pounds of refrigerant in a 5-pound pail right there.
Right.
Please, if you have additional questions regarding R-32, reach out to your long sales engineer. We're more than happy to talk about this. There's a lot of rumors going around in our industry. What refrigerant is this? What refrigerant is that? We at Daikin have equipment that will be using R-454B, so we're not bashing on that refrigerant. It's just simply a comparison, particularly in the package rooftop where we're replacing 410A markets. So don't be afraid of that. And if you're following, as Peter said in a couple slides, early slides, European markets have been using 32 for a long time, and the US seems to be about anywhere from 5 to 10 years behind Europe. What's going on in Europe right now is they're proposing to lower the GWP below 200. And if the reason they're doing that is because of the HFOs and the byproduct of HFOs in the atmosphere creates elements that we can't get rid of. So they're going to completely get rid of HFOs. And if historically we follow Europe as we will, we could be having this conversation in another 5 to 10 years about something completely different. And who knows what that might be. Probably something that's very flammable, like, a natural refrigerant like propane. So again, thank you for joining us. Next week, we've got Luis Gutierrez. He's going to be discussing Innovent pool units at altitude with Dave Milligan from Innovent. So that'll be another great topic. And join us next week. Again, thanks for joining us on the coffee break, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.